For episode 6, we are highlighting a great event being held by TecBRIDGE, an organization that is vital to the business community of Northeastern Pennsylvania. On Thursday, April 21st, they will be hosting their 20th annual business plan competition at the FM Kirby Center in downtown Wilkes-Barre. We had TecBRIDGE Executive Director Don Webster on to talk about the event, its history, and so much more. This competition is the region's signature entrepreneurship and innovation event, and we were so impressed with the participants being showcased this year. Events like this help highlight the world-class talent and the unlimited potential we have right here in our own backyard. TecBRIDGE's slogan, "Why not us? Why not here? Why not now?" captures their mission well. They want to cultivate a mindset for more people to dream big in Northeastern Pennsylvania while providing the resources to support them along the way. If you're interested in attending or learning more, please visit their website at techbridgepa.org. This far-ranging discussion can benefit anyone with an interest in entrepreneurship or who wishes to see more dynamic economic growth in our region. We talked about Don's journey from growing up in the Midwest to graduating from the University of Chicago to working on Wall Street and finally to Northeastern Pennsylvania, where he and his family put their roots down. Don has built, sold, and invested in several businesses throughout his career and brings that experience to his role at TecBRIDGE, where they provide guidance and resources to others trying to do those same things. Our firm has enjoyed getting involved in this event, as our goal is similar. We want to serve as trusted advisors to our clients by helping them make sound decisions so they can get where they want to go. We also want to provide resources that allow them to be better allocators of capital, whether it is at the business or household level. Don's passion for the area and for helping people achieve their dreams is contagious. In this episode, we talk about TecBRIDGE's goal to help connect the business, education, and technology communities to drive innovation in Northeastern Pennsylvania in a cohesive way. He also shares strategic advice he gives aspiring founders and entrepreneurs that can apply to anyone. There was so much packed into this conversation, but be sure to listen to the end when Don reflects on advice he'd give to his 22-year-old self. We hope you enjoy this episode, and we will see you on April 21st at the Business Plan Competition Awards event. All right, so Don Webster, thanks very much for being here. Welcome to the Alliance Wealth Advisors podcast.
You know, it's great to be here today. I'm just grateful for the opportunity.
Very, very happy to have you here, and a seasoned veteran in the podcast and interviewing game in general. So I'm sure I'll learn a thing or two along the way here. So first and foremost, I think congratulations are certainly in order regarding the business planning competition. This year, you guys will be celebrating your 20th anniversary, which is just incredible.
Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool.
Very, very impressive. As soon as you and I started having in the discussion around this, it was certainly something that I thought was worth bringing to a broader audience, particularly, our listeners, and bringing them into maybe something they hadn't heard of before. So can you tell listeners about this year's event, where they can find more information? Our firm has gotten involved to some degree this year, which has been really exciting for us.
Absolutely. So first of all, Mike, just let me say thank you for having me on with your listeners. That's I'm really grateful for that opportunity. And so the 20th annual business plan competition, I think what's pretty interesting about it is it's 20th annual. Like we do anything that's 20 years old.
Yeah,
right?
I haven't done anything 20 years in a row yet. So
I'll tell your audience, we have two divisions. We have a collegiate division and a non-collegiate division. The interesting thing about the collegiate division is we have a team in where the CEO actually was 1 week old.
Wow.
At the first competition, 1 week old. So, it's been going on for a while, and takes a village.
And where is the event coming up for people who may want to, get involved and check you guys out and maybe come to the event with us?
Absolutely. So we are hosting this year at the FM Kirby Center in downtown Wilkes-Barre. It is Thursday, April 21st. And doors open at 5:00. And a lot of our guests actually get there right at 5:00 because we do this thing called the wild card. And the wild card is the guests decide which of the finalists deserved $5,000 on the spot that night.
Wow. So just by showing up, you got a little, you got a little power in your hands.
Everybody gets to be a judge, right?
Very cool. Very cool. And what is the website for your organization? Just for people who may be, on their phones or listening at work who want to check it out.
Absolutely. So it's TecBRIDGEPA.org. So it's TecBRIDGEPA.org, and you can get tickets for the event there.
Great. So around the event, and I want to talk about TecBRIDGE as an organization for sure, and your story, but just around the event at first, I think would be a good place to start. So, 2 decades, as you said, anything you've done for 20 years is worth noting, right? So, would love to hear maybe some highlights that stick out to you over the years, how it's evolved and what it looked like maybe year one compared to what it's going to look like a couple weeks from today, when you get together for year number 20.
So there's so many stories that we could tell. I think probably my favorite story would be just the number of people who have participated over the years. I think it is one of the great things about Northeast Pennsylvania is that people do come together and can make a difference. I had moved here in 1995 to be part of the community as part of NatWest at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was asked to be part of an organizing group that ultimately became TecBRIDGE. And one of the things that they said was, hey, we're really interested in focusing on growing entrepreneurship in the region. Would anybody like to help us do that in different ways? And a colleague of ours said, hey, why don't we do a business plan competition? I was in that competition at MIT, he said. And I'm like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. And both of us were like, hey, we'll go do this because that's what we do. And we didn't know any better. We were like, hey, let's go do this. And so we started. And I remember he said in one of the meetings, hey, Don, 2's a competition.
Let's just get 2 and we're rolling.
Because
baby.
In Northeast Pennsylvania, people don't always think that you can be aspirational. So it was like, all right, can we actually do this? Well, 2's a competition. So we were out working with all the schools, and it was just a great experience. And I think the gift is that it keeps on giving. Yeah,
absolutely. There was, as I did some homework for this interview and this discussion, there was a story that came to mind about Jeff Bezos. And the story goes, when he had the idea for Amazon, he was working on Wall Street at the time, and he's talking to his boss. They're taking a walk through Central Park, and he's giving him all the information and all these ideas about Amazon. And the boss says, that sounds like a great idea for someone who doesn't have a job. And so he was saying, great, that's a great idea, but somebody else should do it. You shouldn't do it. And I think, as I've learned more about TecBRIDGE, as I've learned more about this competition, that story kind of came to me a little bit, because in this area, I think you see that to some degree. I think you probably see it everywhere, but to this area in particular. And so, this idea of, if you're thinking about doing something, how do you go about actually doing it? And that's where your group comes in. That's where your organization comes in. Is that first of all, am I on the right track? And second of all, would you agree with
Well, so first of all, let's unpack the Bezos story a second, right? So, that's for somebody else, that's for somebody else. I think one of the things that I find about Northeast Pennsylvania, listen, my glass overflows. I'm not that half filled, half empty guy. I mean, I'm very strong proponent of all the possibilities and the potential here in the region. And we could talk more about that.
Definitely.
But I think, relative to the Bezos story is, well, we need to encourage people to dream. And I think if you've got passion for something, then we're the organization that says, let's go figure out how you go do that. Mm-hmm. And I just think that we need more of that as a community, as a society, as a country. Hey, don't be afraid to dream. Let's dream. And if you dream it, then you can do it. If you don't dream it, you're never going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. By definition. Why do you think, what is the biggest sort of initial hurdle to that dream, and then saying, okay, I'm going to act on it? Because I think there are a lot of people, there are no shortage of ideas, right?
Right.
Ideas are cheap. Execution is expensive. And so what is a common thing you see in your role at TecBRIDGE, where people might be hesitant out of the gates?
Well, so I think the point that you're making, it's often said that there's lots of good ideas. There aren't always lots of good businesses. And so
that's
why why is it that we have lots of good ideas we can't translate? And if you read some of the statistics, you know, they're rough. I mean, you know, the number of people that try things but fail over 1 or 3 or 5 years, and fail is a word that, you know, maybe we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah. That's
a topic. But, you know, what's interesting is I think that people need to just, give it a chance. And the way you give it a chance is do the work, right? So if you've got an idea, first of all, go explore it. And by, what do I mean by that? So when I say explore it, just start looking around, be curious, get your curious on. You know, what else on the internet can you find about this idea? What else, if you were to talk to a friend about it, what would you hear? If you actually were to do a thing, could you go find somebody that would buy your thing? Because that's the definition of a customer, right? Someone who will buy something from you. Not your mom, not your dad.
Otherwise,
right?
they're doing you a favor.
Somebody else that will pay you money for whatever it is that you're proposing that you want to do. But you need to go sort of explore that. And so get out and talk to people, and get out and find out what people think, and don't be afraid to not share.
Yeah. In my own story of, you know, my first 5 years of my career were with one, you know, big Wall Street company, and then the second 5 were with another one. And this, you know, what I'm doing now was sort of always in the back of my mind. And I don't know that I knew how, or I was afraid. And that security of a big company was something I sort of clung to for a little bit. And, you know, in conversations with Alliance and doing my homework and, you know, putting pen to paper, it was, you know, at some point I had to make the decision. Am I going to do this, or am I just going to think about it? So I certainly relate to how scary and intimidating it can be at certain points.
Right. So actually that was sort of the word that I was thinking about while you were talking, is for a lot of people, taking risk is scary. Actually, for a lot of people, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, so I think a lot of entrepreneurs look at risk differently, but for me, I think it's all about encouragement. I think we as a community, we as a country need to be more encouraging in all aspects, and that's in many forms. And I think entrepreneurship is just one dimension of that. But there is the ability to try things here in Northeast Pennsylvania that maybe you can't do in a lot of places. And I think that's the message that I would deliver to your audience. Don't be afraid to explore. Don't be able to investigate. And if you've always wanted to try to do something, well, then organizations like ours and yours are there to help people to figure out how to go ahead and explore that dream. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to the competition, I think when it comes to TecBRIDGE, and a lot of what we're talking about here, your story is really important to it. Your personal story and your career arc is important to it, because I think, you know, for me, you know, you're the example of exactly what we're talking about here. And what's unique about your story, which I want listeners to hear, is you're not from here, and you love this area more than anyone. You're as bullish on this area as anyone. And I think that that is something people from the area need to see more of, because they view it from their own lens, which is very different from yours. So would love to hear sort of, you know, your path, and you touched on it a little bit, but your path to Northeastern Pennsylvania and you know, the role you're in today.
So sure. So a couple of things there. So first of all, for those in your audience that may not know what TecBRIDGE is about, TecBRIDGE is a not-for-profit organization. It's regional. And we focus on helping high school students, college students, aspiring entrepreneurs. We help them grow, right? So our focus is on entrepreneurship and innovation, and we say the knowledge economy, because that's sort of a play on words, whether it's knowledge-based jobs or our colleges and universities. There's 16 colleges and universities within an hour's drive of Montage Mountain. They are businesses in and of themselves, and huge assets for our region. And so to the degree that we can leverage those assets, then, you know, we can do some pretty cool things here. So my journey. So I grew up in the Midwest. I went to the University of Chicago. I'm a diehard Cubs fan, which maybe is part of my story because, I'm always rooting for the underdog. So coming out of school, I got an opportunity to work on Wall Street. That used to be cool to say. So I moved out here to the East Coast and was really fortunate. I met my wife on Wall Street, and we sort of grew through the Wall Street experience, and we kept moving farther and farther away from Wall Street as our family came together. So we ended up I was commuting from Newtown, Pennsylvania, which is just on the other side of the Delaware River, going out of Trenton into Wall Street every day, 2 hours each day. But it was a good experience for us because we had the ability to do the work thing that we wanted to do and the home thing that we wanted to do. Interestingly enough, we were asked to relocate here in 1995 to run the back office operation of NatWest at the time. It was the largest announced corporate relocation in the country in 1995. 300,000 square foot building at Montage Mountain. 3,000 jobs were coming to Northeast Pennsylvania. And essentially, if you weren't doing something like this, if you weren't just having a conversation with a customer, your job was coming to Northeast Pennsylvania. So we're talking treasury, we're talking systems, we're talking HR, we're talking wire transfer, we're talking everything that was customer support was coming to Northeast Pennsylvania.
Was this part of the quote unquote Wall Street West initiative, or was this even before that?
I think people in NatWest like to say that it was Wall Street West before Wall Street West was a thing.
Okay.
So we had done a series of mergers in New Jersey. I was responsible for the integration. So as soon as we would acquire a bank, they'd hand me the contract. The ink wasn't even dry yet, and said, "Don, you and your team make this happen." So we ended up having some organizational inefficiencies just because of the continued growth. So we were actually operating out of a lot of high cost, low quality areas. And so there was a study that we did strategically to say, well, if we wanted to operate in one consolidated location in the country, where would it be? And so that we did what's called a greenfield analysis. Okay, it's a whiteboard. Hey, if we just want to go somewhere, anywhere to do what we want to do, where's the best place to go?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is for NatWest, the best place to go was Northeast Pennsylvania. and actually, so look,
it makes a lot of sense when you think through it, but at first, when you first say that, like even as I'm sitting here and I moved, bet my career, moved my family back. We wanted to live here. And even as you say that, I'm like, that's really interesting.
Well, and some people are like, yeah, get out of here. No, actually, it was a really interesting process. So we're talking about Newport News. We're talking about Jacksonville. We're talking about Austin. We're talking about Utah. We looked. And so for us, Northeast Pennsylvania represented the ability to get to headquarters within a reasonable period of time. But it also represented to us a place that had high quality, cost-effective opportunities. And so when you look at Northeast Pennsylvania, one of the things that I like to tell people is there's 16 colleges and universities within an hour's drive of Montage Mountain.
Yeah. I
don't know that that's the case in a lot of places. But if you just think about the possibilities right there, then you look at everything else. So Northeast Pennsylvania is strategically located on the eastern seaboard to 36%. I mean, it depends on, do you want to talk an hour's drive? You want a 2 hours drive? I mean, we're talking New York, we're talking, we're in Washington, DC in 3 hours. We're in, it's amazing how much of the population you can get to from Northeast Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So,
other than location, what were the other factors you and your team were looking at, in terms of locating here?
So that's a really good question. I think I'd sum it up maybe by saying opportunity. So there's pros and cons with that. So opportunity, look, let's be real. There was cost-effective space in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Right.
Historically, it has been known for unemployment But actually what I would say about Northeast Pennsylvania, what I've seen is underemployment. So just lack of opportunity.
Right.
So for us to be able to come here, we were able to capitalize on all the things that we see as assets. So we saw the opportunity to have a really good talent pool. And talent pool could be experienced people, or it could be the college students. We saw the opportunity to create space at a cost, at a reasonable price.
That square footage is probably a little bit different.
It's a lot
out
different.
in Hoboken.
and then the reality, thanks to Governor Casey, he was very interested in seeing Pennsylvania compete on a national level, and so they were very aggressive with their economic development incentive plans, and everybody was everybody being those different states were looking for large kinds of corporate relocations, and Pennsylvania was, I think, aggressive, and they have this gorgeous building up at Montage Mountain, and guess what? A bunch of us stayed. A bunch of us are still here.
Yeah. So tell that story, because the timing's really interesting. So you and your team make that decision.
Okay.
All right, we're all in Northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Let's go.
Hey Don, we'd like you to
pack the trucks.
We'd like you to be responsible for the operations, because I'm a back office guy. I'm a process guy. Great, love it. We're going from Newtown to Scranton. Okay, that's kind of interesting. I have a family. I have a wife, and I had 2 daughters at the time. So when we moved here, my oldest was going into 3rd grade. My youngest was a preschooler. They moved up here in time to go to school, which was they moved up here in August, and I think 3 weeks later, they announced the sale of the bank in the UK.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So the bank is sold.
No, the bank is put up for sale.
Put up for sale. Okay.
House is half built.
You're living in boxes.
The boxes in the condo that we had rented are not even, the suitcases aren't unpacked. School has just started, and okay, what are we going to do? And so, at one level, it was just like business as usual, because for those of us who knew what we were doing in Northeast Pennsylvania, or why we were trying to do what we were doing in Northeast Pennsylvania, it was, all right, well, let's just make this the crown jewel. So we saw an opportunity, even though we were really early in our development, we saw an opportunity to say, hey, this is a reason why you want us.
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally, when banks are sold, the first thing that people do is they close the back offices, and they integrate everything into their preferred solution, because that's where they think the savings are. And we were like, yeah, you need to take another look at what we're doing here. And so over the course of the interview process, we got a chance to showcase Northeast Pennsylvania to a new set of interested parties, and Fleet ultimately bought the bank, and then Fleet was purchased by Bank of America, but
still there.
But you know what? It's still there.
Yeah,
it's still there.
So I think one thing we always try to focus on here in these conversations is how people made those big decisions, those inflection points,
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, that's what our job is, and why people trust us and want to work with us, is because we can help think through life decisions. The portfolio management, the financial planning, all that stuff comes later, but it's based on, I need to get from A to B in my life. The other stuff is sort of on the back end. And so how do you and your wife think through that decision to say, you know what, we're here for the right reasons, and we're going to stay?
It's interesting. So you sort of gave me that question in advance, and I really had to reflect on it. So for one, it was a choice. Don't be afraid to make choices. And so what we were faced with, we were fortunate enough, we were, invited to relocate to Kingston, New York. We were asked if we wanted to go to London, and we said no thanks, because what we really liked was that, I had gone from commuting 2 hours each way. I mean, there were nights I'd get home at 2:00 in the morning when we're working on mergers, to go and turn around and be, back out the door at 5 a.m.
Brutal.
But there was a reason. I wanted to make sure that I kiss my daughters, kiss my wife, and turn around and do it again. But what was interesting is we felt that we had an opportunity that was good for our family here. And so it wasn't that we were afraid. It was more like, oh, let's go try this. I mean, we can always go back. I mean, I went from the Midwest to Wall Street. I probably should have thought more about, are you taking a risk? But it wasn't a risk. It was more of like, oh, let's go try this. This is an opportunity. And so again, when this happened for us, well, this was an opportunity to change our model from a family perspective.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to have a number of really good colleagues. And I was like, hey, we should go do this. And do you want to go do this with me? And do you want to try this with us? And they're all like, yeah, it was, sometimes
it almost sparked the ideas that might not have come.
Well, it's interesting because what I'll tell you is, COVID has sort of created this, what I'll call forced reset. The Great Resignation is the term that everybody talks about.
Right.
But there are times in your life when there's things called, like, I call it a forced reset. So here's this situation. You come to a crossroads, and which way do you go? Well, pick one. And so what we decided was we were going to pick the one that worked for us, and we were going to try this work thing. And what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, we have to move. Well, we were going to move anyways.
Right.
So why not go ahead and do what you want to, which is dream the dream. And so our dream was, let's go try this.
It goes back to what you said in the beginning, which is like how people view risk so differently. And what I always try to instill when it comes to investing is uncertainty and risk aren't the same things, right?
Exactly.
Risk is what you can measure. Uncertainty is what you can't. And they're very different things in most cases. But the risk of saying, well, if it doesn't work, we'll just move anyway because we were going to. I think a lot of young families are going through that right now, and the unfamiliar is scary, but it's, if you make a decision, you can always go back.
Well, I think the other thing is, there's probably some in your audience who are like, no, I can't do that. Like, wait, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, wait, that's no. Well, here's what I would say. Go ahead and talk to people about it. I think that goes back to something we were talking about before. Don't be afraid to explore. And sometimes that leaves you in a position where you're a little bit vulnerable. And sometimes change is hard. But if you put the right people around you and you ask the right questions, you're going to get data. And that's how you manage risk, right? Mm-hmm. Is just get the data so that you make informed decisions. And then don't look back. I think that's the one other thing that I would say is part of this, Mike, is don't look back.
Yeah.
People say, oh, well, are you sad that you didn't stay in banking? And I was like, no, banking changed a lot. I really liked banking. And so you know what I did? I turned around and I created an angel fund that allowed me to do some of the financial stuff that I really like to do. But I'm a process guy at heart. And so, that's what we do.
Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. And I think a lot could be taken from that example. I think it also touches on another big sort of conversation that's been going on for decades, for as longer than the business plan competition, which is keeping talent in the area, right? So many people, they are educated here, they grow up here, they love it here, but then they leave, right? And some of that is what you mentioned, which is lack of opportunity. And whether it's politicians, economic developers, business owners, parents, they want to avoid this brain drain, so to speak, of the talent leaving the area. In speaking with you, though, I heard your perspective, and it was a little bit different.
It's a little different,
yep. But it for when I just look at the people in my network, whether they be friends, clients, family members, it's not that people need to stay forever, right? But it's about making this area more attractive to come back to. Is that a fair way to put it in terms of how you think?
Absolutely. So I'm all for creating opportunities for those who are here. That's who TecBRIDGE is. Maybe that's who I am. But in order to do that, I think you need to create awareness about why it's good to be here, or why it's okay to be here, or why I want to be here. And what I've always found so amazing about Northeast Pennsylvania is, for many people here, family is a very strong reason for why they're here. But what I would say is I'm actually the proponent that says go see the world. I think that's really important, because if you don't go see the world, then you don't have anything to judge what sort of good or not good is, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right. So I'm really a proponent of go see the world and figure out what your dream is. And then, if your dream says that you want to try and do that in Northeast Pennsylvania, whatever that is, well, then we as a community need to have the infrastructure and the relationships and all the things that matter, no matter who you are, whatever it is that people say they need in order to be, I won't say happy because I can't make you happy, but to bring you joy, then we as a community need to be focusing on that, for whatever age or whatever position or whatever business or whatever, why is Northeast Pennsylvania the place for you? And everybody answers that differently, but we need to be really good listeners about that.
Yeah. What are those things that don't make it feel overwhelming to move back?
Well, I think that the thing that I would say, Mike, is if we really are honest with ourselves, most places, almost all places, have issues. I mean, there's probably nirvana in some places, and people define that usually by weather. But most places have issues. They're just different, So Northeast Pennsylvania has its issues. We could spend a whole show talking about what the issues are in Northeast Pennsylvania. But many
people do spend a lot of time doing that.
And so, yeah, so that's a waste of energy. But what I would say is fixing those issues is important, but every place has issues. And so the question is, what do you value and what's important to you? And do you find it here? And if you don't, well, then what can we do to fix it? Now, I will say, some people say that, that if the worst thing about Northeast Pennsylvania is that you want spring to come sooner and fall to last later, well, that's Chicago. I mean,
or Rochester, where I went to college,
right.
Or Buffalo.
But yet, on the other hand, you have, the running joke. I'd say you have 4 seasons. Some people say we have 2. But you know what? You have the ability to be outdoors in so many different ways. If that's a thing, we have world-class trails. We have world-class fishing. We have world-class capabilities in so many ways that, hey, there's a lot of that here if you just choose to look for it.
Yeah. One thing I got a kick out of was a story you told to me about when you and your wife moved back, the difference in going to the grocery store. And I think anybody who's from here or has lived here for some period of their lives and lived in a bigger city can relate to this. And I'm adjusting to it as I've moved home these last couple of years.
Well, let me talk to your audience in that regard. So one of the interesting things about my wife and I is that we lived somewhere else than we worked. So a lot of our time was outside our community. In Northeast Pennsylvania, that's different. Most people live and work in Northeast Pennsylvania. So when we first moved here, it was not uncommon for us to go to the grocery store and the running joke, Laura would say, well, I'm not wearing makeup. And I'm like, well, I'm not shaving, and I'm going to wear sweats. And lo and behold, we'd go to the grocery store and we'd run into like 5 or 6 people, and it's like, oh man, like,
boy.
So that's the thing on the one hand was like, well, you just bump into so many people, here. Actually, that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is, from my perspective, one of the great things about Northeast Pennsylvania that I think we really do need to value as a community is if you want to make a difference here, you can. And that's because you live and work in the same place. So you're just here more, but you can make a difference here in Northeast Pennsylvania if you want to. And whether that's socially or philanthropically or just giving of your time, that's one of the things that I and we really value.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you're not the first person who I've interviewed who has said that either. That idea that you can move the needle here. You can be
part of something. I mean,
yeah.
You can be part of a business plan competition where you can be a judge or you can be a mentor. You can get involved in helping a team or a company get to the next level. But you can also do that with, a charity or a philanthropy. You can actually get out and get stuff done, and you can actually make a difference.
Yeah. So, good segue there, not designed, but with TecBRIDGE and TecBRIDGE's mission, which you talked about a little bit earlier, they offer so much, I think, to our community at large, particularly our business community. I do think, though, and I'm speaking from my own experience, until recently, I knew the organization. There's certainly name recognition. I didn't really know what you guys did, how you did it, sort of where you operated. So can you talk a little bit about that in detail for listeners who may, be looking for exactly, something that you do and do really well, but just don't necessarily know where to find it at this moment.
Right. So first of all, thank you for that opportunity. What you're bringing up is something that we talk about, and talk about the fact that we need to do more of, which is, what is TecBRIDGE? I mean, it's been around for 20 years. It actually was started by Bill Scranton and Austin Burke and Steve Baruch. So that's the leaders of the chambers of Wilkes-Barre and Scranton at the time, or Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. And it was really interesting because they came together, and this was at the time before the internet was really a thing. And they came together and sponsored a study that says, how do we capitalize on the assets of Northeast Pennsylvania in a different way? So historically, if you look at the history of Northeast Pennsylvania, it's our labor or our physical assets that usually got, quote unquote, leveraged, right? Leveraged.
But talk about an old banking word.
But really, they said, well, gee, there's this thing called the internet, and if the internet is real, this is 20 years ago. I mean, 25 years ago now. If this is a thing, then knowledge is going to matter. And if we could capitalize on knowledge, that's something that Northeast Pennsylvania could be very competitive in. And so that's how the predecessor organization came to being. Bill Scranton and Bob Sharufli from Perenni Randolph at the time became the first chairs. And what they did is they went out and they reached out to influencers in the community and said, hey, we want to do this regional thing. And, there's the running joke about Scranton and Wilkes-Barre and pack a lunch. And if you go into Hazleton, you're staying overnight, all that kind of funny. I mean, I commuted 2 hours each way to work every day.
Yeah, that's got to blow your mind.
Yeah. So I'm like, what? So they brought regional influencers together. And interestingly enough, what they did is they asked all of the college presidents to be on this board of this organization. And they talked about, what can we do regionally? And so remember, the chambers are involved in this organization. So the chambers have their mission, they have their geography, they have their purpose for their stakeholders. Here they were putting this sort of umbrella organization together to say, how do we leverage in a positive way relationships and synergies around this knowledge kind of stuff? And so that meant tech-based entrepreneurship, tech-based economic development, knowledge-based. All right, can we unleash the dragon? And you know what? If you look at the history of what we're doing, and actually what we're doing right now with the business plan competition, it's just crazy. You talk to the economic development professionals, and there's just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. There was a line you used, which I had heard before in terms of politics. It was, the old line, all politics is local. And you had said all business is local.
I said all entrepreneurship is local.
All entrepreneurship is local.
Yes.
So
what did I mean by that?
Yeah, it's an interesting point around here in particular. Again, with this region, I was laughing last night. I was at a networking event in Wilkes-Barre, and
thank you for sponsoring that
event. And that was all Jude, so I won't take credit. But you meet someone from Hazleton, you meet somebody from Dallas, Wilkes-Barre, and it's a completely different network. It's a completely different sort of world in many ways. Even being from Dunmore, we looked at a house in Clark Summit, and friends and family were like, "What are you doing? You're going to go all the way up there?"
Is that the Abington?
Yeah. And so that's very much an ingrained mindset, both personally, but also on the business front, I think. And so as you're looking at the whole region from 30,000 feet, what do you see that others may not, right? Those more local organizations, and how do you connect those dots?
Yeah, let me put those sort of two thoughts together. So what I said was all entrepreneurship is local, and what I meant by that was, if you're someone that's interested in food preparation, food processing,
okay.
I don't know if our audience knows this, but the Carbondale Technology Center is a regional center of excellence when it comes to entrepreneurial food processing. I mean, they're a kitchen incubator, and they're fabulous at what they do for people who are interested in building food-based businesses. They've got all sorts of infrastructure, and it's up in Carbondale, and they're amazing. They're awesome. They've got some great companies there, some great leadership there. And what's interesting, what I meant by that is, well, gee, if you're in Hazleton and you want to start a food-based business, you're not going to drive to Carbondale every day to do your food processing business.
Right.
You're just not. But that doesn't mean that you can't take advantage or leverage or utilize the expertise of the Regional Center of Excellence in Carbondale, because they're there to help, whether it's startup or compliance or strategy. And so what we need to do is recognize that entrepreneurs aren't going to drive long distances. They're going to basically build their businesses either in their homes or close to them, because it doesn't make sense for them to drive 2 hours. They're out doing stuff. And so entrepreneurs tend to be what I think they need to be. They're physically located locally.
There's a reason all those stories of tech startups are in the garage, right?
Absolutely. That's a really good way of putting it. But that doesn't mean that we as a community can't leverage, I must have used that word about 50 times in this interview, the knowledge and the relationships and the infrastructure of the region. And I think that's the key, is that you need to reach out beyond your local footprint. But when I say entrepreneurship is local, I mean it's local as it relates to where they operate.
To operating, yeah.
Right.
And what are some of the things you see from
30,000 feet?
Yeah,
that was the other part of your question.
From TecBRIDGE's perch.
Right. So TecBRIDGE is this organization. We're a connector organization. We help grow entrepreneurship, innovation, and the knowledge economy. I think the best, if you have questions about TecBRIDGE, just go out and look at the website, TecBridgePA.org, TecBridgePA.org, no H. But from 30,000 feet, one of the things that we focus on when we're talking as a board is how do we create synergies? How do we capitalize on talent? Because I think that's the one thing that this region has quite a bit of. That I'm not saying that we don't have openings that we need to fill, but there is quite a bit of talent here. There's actually world-class companies doing world-class things all over Northeastern Pennsylvania. And we do a podcast on a weekly basis just to showcase some of those fantastic people doing fantastic things, whether it's in the private sector or the economic development sector or our schools.
Yeah. And I think that there's plenty of people, many of my clients are out of the area, but have some tie to the area often. I know a lot of them would love to come back, and it may be easier through, working from home and things like that post COVID. But many just feel like they couldn't before that.
Well, isn't it interesting that how housing prices went up in Northeast Pennsylvania during COVID? And there are quite a few people who have relocated because they're looking for a different model. And so Steve Case from AOL talked about Rise of the Rest. And the concept of Rise of the Rest was, hey, there's Silicon Valley, and everybody thought that's where tech needed to be. But the reality is you don't need to be in Silicon Valley to create cool tech. And, look at Northeast Pennsylvania. It's a perfect example. Back to your 30,000 foot question. One of the interesting things about Northeast Pennsylvania, I said it before, I'll say it again, is our school infrastructure. And if you think about all of our college and universities as what I like to say sometimes as NEPA University, if we had all the colleges and universities who compete every day for students, but they collaborate every day too. If we had all of the researchers rowing in the same direction, if we were collaborating, then, you're talking about an institution that would be 50,000 students,
Right.
as large as any in the country practically. But we have a medical school, we have an architecture school, we have a pharmacy, a pharmaceutical, a pharmacy program.
Yeah.
We've got all these different initiatives and competencies at these schools. If we can align them, then, we can really capitalize.
It's a great idea. Yeah. I never thought of that, thought of it in that way. It's a really, really interesting concept. A phrase you use a lot, along these lines. It reminded me of the Red Sox back in 2004 when
Cup fan.
Speaking of underdogs, so they're down 3-0, and one of the players started this rallying cry where he said, "Why not us? Don't let us win tonight. Why not us? Why can't we come all the way back?" And they did. And I think so often the overall tone of people in terms of perception of the area can be negative. There could be a lack of confidence, at least, maybe, if not outright negative. How do you think about this idea of why not us? Why not Northeastern Pennsylvania? And how do we improve that self-perception?
So for me, the tag phrase that we use at TecBRIDGE is why not us? Why not here? Why not now? Let's go. Right? Why not us?
I like that.
Why not here? Why not now? And it's about ambition and aspiration, and it's about looking at things through a different lens. So yes, we can see things for what they are. Well, we can choose to see things for what they are, or we can know them for what they've been. And I vote, let's look forward. I vote, let's dream dreams. I vote, let's create opportunities to excel. That's who I am. Let's create opportunities and then capitalize on them.
Yeah. And it forces you to those simple questions forces you to shift your mindset to say, well, am I just looking for an excuse, or, do I want to do this? Right.
Well, and it goes back to some of the things that we talked about at the beginning of the show. For me, it's putting together, surrounding yourself with those people where you can have trusted conversations. So what are some of the things that we need to do differently here? Well, I would encourage all of us to help others see things for what they can be. But that doesn't mean that it isn't hard. It doesn't mean that it isn't challenging. It doesn't mean that it isn't change. What it means is you potentially have an opportunity. If you want to go for the opportunity, how do you do it? And that's part of what TecBRIDGE and other economic development organizations are really focusing on, is if you're interested, don't be afraid to try. And there's lots of economic development organizations in the region who will help you understand. And there's lots of good mentors, and there's lots of people who want to help see people.
Definitely.
Just go for it.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think you've made the decision to dream, and then, where your group comes in is the how, right?
Well, I think the other piece of this is I don't want it, it's not all motherhood and apple pie. Yay. It's just, this stuff is hard. And so what I encourage your audience to do is in all aspects of their life, find trusted voices. If you take one thing away from our conversation today, I encourage, manly men who, I just will never talk to anybody about anything. Find trusted voices and ask them hard questions, because they're trusted voices. And the way I would define trusted voices, people care about you. They don't want anything from you. They are just interested in being supportive. So those are the kinds of people you can talk about. Hey, I have this idea, or hey, I need to learn more, or hey, where do I go? And that's how you start. And then the other thing I would say, Mike, is get your curious on. Just get your curious on. Just go explore.
There was a concept I learned about in business school that was about creating your own personal board of directors. And that was really what, I guess, the same thing you're saying here, which is look at a diverse group of people who you don't need anything from, but who are going to talk to you straight and get their advice and poke their or pick their brain on a consistent basis. Is that sort of the same thing?
Well, it is one of the big mistakes that I think a lot of entrepreneurs make, particularly have made in Northeast Pennsylvania, is, I've got this great idea. One of the things that's very characteristic about entrepreneurs is their passion, maybe their competence, maybe too much competence. But what's interesting is that, as you sort of drive to achieve whatever this vision is, if you don't go out and test that idea or that vision with a prospect or with a customer, you're probably not going to be successful. And that's probably the number one reason why those businesses and that failure statistic is so high, is because people don't go out and talk to other people. I got this great idea, Mike. I got this great idea. And all I need to do is sort of tweak it a little bit more, and I'll get there. And well, wait, did you ask anybody who's going to actually buy this product or service if they would buy your product or service? Did you talk to anybody? We talk about it with our investment process all the time. If you don't stress test your ideas, you don't know if it's going to hold up. Well, stress test is a great phrase. The phrase that I like to talk about, sometimes people talk about failure as this concept. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
because I think, like you said, there's a lot of people are saying, yeah, that's great, Don. I'm dreaming my dream, and it's all great.
NFW.
What if I fall on my face and I have to make a mortgage payment?
Well, and so if you have that trusted group around, you can figure out the process to address that. But I think the word that I wanted to say, Mike, was experiment. That's a fancy way for test. It's also an interesting way to say risk, right? You got to go experiment.
Yeah. And I think, in talking about failing, we have, as a society, we're in an environment right now where we're looking at people's lives largely through screens, even more so in the last 2 years than ever before, obviously. And everyone's using filters, and they're putting the best, often highly curated, let's say, version of themselves out there. And it is causing us to say, how do they make that much money? Or how do they go on that vacation? Or how do they do this? And it looks so easy for them. And we start questioning ourselves because we're looking through these filters. So, what do you tell people who you come across who are, have everything it takes, you think, but that idea of failure is just so scary to them? So failure is an interesting word, and we could spend a whole show on it maybe, but the thing that I would say to you is you have to think about the context of the word. So is failure an outcome, or is failure a, attitude? So in some respects, look, outcome wise, failure is consequences. But at another level, failure is just the other side of experimentation, right? Because you get data. And if you learn from the data, then you can reapply it in a way that just continues to improve your process. Now, I'm not going to suggest that failure has this negative connotation associated, right? So I think whenever I hear the word failure, most people say, well, like the end of the tale is like failure is the really bad stuff. Yeah. Right. Really bad stuff does happen. Like, let's be honest. So, but all the time,
if you are doing the incremental approach to testing and experimenting, those failures don't have to be catastrophic. Right. And so I think we need to talk about failure in the context of failure is a process, and sometimes it produces data that improves you and you learn from. Now, I'm not going to suggest that there aren't catastrophic outcomes called failure, but in Silicon Valley, if you haven't quote unquote failed, you're probably not viewed as a successful entrepreneur for purposes of venture capital. Yeah. And that's all the way you look at it, right?
It's so true. If you haven't failed out there, they're like, okay, well, this guy's fake.
Well, in some respects,
something's up. Right?
If we're talking catastrophic, I get it. I understand that part. But, in a lot of senses, if you haven't sort of quote unquote failed, you haven't really pushed yourself far enough to know where the limits are.
To get out of the comfort zone.
Where are the limits, right? And so there's an element of incremental processes that you need to continuously be testing. But sometimes bad stuff happens, and really bad stuff can happen. And, we put a label on that called failure.
Yeah. So for the listener who has the idea, or maybe they don't, but they like the idea of being a business owner or an entrepreneur one day. What are 3 things, regardless of age or, what your background is, that you would tell someone considering, taking this leap that we're talking about?
So 3 things is really interesting because it could be 1 or it could be 5. I never give people the option of saying 3 because pick 1. What's the hardest one? You give me 3. So, let me think about that for a second. It's a really good question. What are 3 things? I would say 1, do your homework. So get your curious on. I say that all the time, which is explore, do your homework, gather data, because that will help you make better decisions. And then the second thing I would say is once you've done your homework, test your homework. I think one of the big things that I would encourage anyone who's considering a change, whether you're in any aspect, is kind of give some thought, do the work, but then go out and test whatever it is you're thinking about. Do not be afraid to get feedback that's contrary to what you want. Entrepreneurs do that all the time. I got this great idea, but I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want them to tell me why it might, right?
It might not be the outcome I want now.
So one, if you're thinking about a change, do the work. Whether you're an entrepreneur or you're anyone, do the work.
Yeah, the test is a really important part, though, particularly in today's environment, because these days, if anybody tells you something that you don't want to hear or you don't agree with, it's World War III, right? So verbally.
But if you have those trusted resources, and I really encourage, I keep coming back to that.
Yeah,
trusted voices. Trusted voices don't want anything from you other than to be supportive. So it's do the homework, test your homework. Again, customers are people that buy things. They're not your family who will do this for you because they want you to be happy. And then the third thing I would say is launch. One of the big things that I think entrepreneurs in general, and maybe in Northeast Pennsylvania, is they think they have to have perfection. Get something. If you've got something, get it out in the market. See what the market has to say. You may have the greatest thing in the whole world, but if nobody wants to buy it, it isn't going to be successful. Get it out, get feedback, continuously innovate till you get to the point where you know what success looks like and you define success. So 3 things. 1, do your homework. 2, test your homework. 3, if you're going to do it, get it done. Put it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get started.
Yeah. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Progress, not perfection.
I guess there's a reason in your world, in the tech world, why what's the MVP? It's like the most viable product comes out first, right?
Minimum viable
product.
Get something out there, get some feedback, and then roll.
Yeah. I like that a lot. So one last question I have for you, and thank you for taking all this time. The question I have asked all my guests so far, and I've gotten so many, great answers that I've learned from. But what advice, and you just named, I'm sure 3 of them, and certainly 3 things that I'm going to write down when we finish here. But what advice would you give yourself at 22, knowing and experiencing, all you know and have seen and experienced at this point in your life?
So for the benefit of your audience, thank you for some of the questions in advance so I could reflect. This by far was the greatest question. I have to tell you, Mike, I had to actually really think about it. And I ask actually all of your audience to think about the question that you just asked me. So what would you tell your 22-year-old self? All right. Well, first of all, I had to go back and figure out where was I at 22. And so I had to spend some time. So I was working on Wall Street. I had been there about 6 months. I'd come from the Midwest. I'd come from Chicago. I'd moved to New York. I was like, yeah, Chicago to New York, no big deal. I got to Wall Street. I was like, oh my God. I'd been there about 6 months. I, at the time, within that 6 months, met my future wife. That was kind of interesting. But,
wow. Yeah.
But it was a great question because my 22-year-old self, I thought about so many things and I kept coming back to, I wish I knew more about my family. And so my 22-year-old self thought my parents were going to live forever. My dad died too soon. My grandfather died too soon. They died before I was ready for them to have them go. And there are so many things that I think I would have asked them. Like my dad was in the Navy, and I see all these pictures, especially when I'm cleaning out the house after they both passed. And there's all these pictures about these big ships in Cuba. And I never really knew what my dad's naval experience was. And I talked to my mom's sister, my aunt who lives in Dingman's Ferry. And she tells me about all the great stories about our family on their side. And, they started one of the first breweries in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I think I would say to my 22-year-old self, spend more time with your family and spend more time understanding your family history. That was really where I resonated.
Wow. That is a great answer that I think anybody can take.
The corollary to that is, in reflecting, I've been blessed. I'm very grateful for my wife and my family. They've allowed me to do things that I could never have done. And they were part of the voices of you can do it, Dad. You can do it, Don. And it's probably why we are where we are today, good or bad, is because they gave me the chance to try. But it's the last thing I would say is it's a we, and no matter what, if you're thinking about trying to do something different, just remember that there are consequences no matter what. They can be good, they can be bad, but it's going to have impacts on more than just you. And so I need to say thank you to my wife and my family for supporting me and allowing me to go try these things and experiment and try and make a difference. And I'm really grateful for that.
Don, that's so great. Thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for the guidance, the advice. Look forward to this great event on the 21st.
We did our live presentation finals last night.
Yes,
Mike, it was amazing. If you want to come see the future of Northeast Pennsylvania, it was fabulous last night. Thursday, April 21st at the FM Kirby Center. You can buy tickets at TecBRIDGEPA.org. I would say reach out or call me or check or, reach out and ask me any questions you want. I'm happy to answer them. And I hope this was worth your time today.
Certainly was worth my time. I'll see you on the 21st. Thanks so much, Don.
All right. Really good. Thanks for having me. And thanks for listening, audience.
The information on this podcast was created by Alliance Wealth Advisors and published for informational purposes only. The guest on this episode was not a client at the time of this interview and did not receive any compensation. For more information, please visit alliancewealthadvisors.com.